From the most trusted names in local news, KDPG Sunday Edition.
Good morning and welcome to the KDPG Sunday Edition. I'm Ken Rice. It's another warning signal from the climate. July was the hottest month in recorded history. That's according to data released this week by scientists at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA also says the last 5 Julys are the 5 hottest on record. Here in Pittsburgh, we have many people working to address the challenges of a warming climate, and they were brought together by Congressman Mike Doyle for a climate town hall this past week to discuss solutions that can be put into place globally, nationally, and locally. We are joined this morning by 2 of the panelists at that town hall. Grant Irvin is Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Pittsburgh. He's going to explain what that means. And Ashley Deemer is the Western PA Director for PennEnvironment. And joining me on this side of the desk, Jerry Micco, Senior Assistant Managing Editor for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Jerry, nice to have you back on the show. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So when you heard that July was the hottest July that Earth has ever recorded in recorded history, I take it neither of you were surprised.
No, not at all.
So what do we do with that information? So, I mean, I hear that. It sounds alarming. I think, should I be doing something? Should my town be doing something? Should Allegheny County, should Pennsylvania? What should we make of that news? Ashley, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest change that can be achieved is with policy change at the state level. So PennEnvironment is advocating for a new policy in the State House and Senate to get Pennsylvania to 100% renewable energy. We know that to avert the worst impacts of climate change, we need to get off of fossil fuels and reduce our carbon burden by 2050 to 0.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I hear that and I think, my goodness, this is not a state of Pennsylvania issue. It's a worldwide issue, and even if Pennsylvania does everything it can, and Ohio and New Jersey and the United States of America and all of the Western world, what do you do about China and India, massive polluters? I mean, it seems like it's an issue that is so big and seems so difficult to solve that people throw their hands up. Do you encounter that attitude?
We do see some of that, but it's also one of the things as cities, both here in the city of Pittsburgh, but globally, we've started to band together to realize that we have key challenges and opportunities that we can confront and take action on. So if you look at carbon emissions across the globe, cities emit about 70% of those emissions. So when we start to think about reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, cities are a great place to start. And there's several key things that we can do with that. We can look at energy efficiency in our buildings. We can look at how we procure and what type of energy that we consume. And we can change transportation patterns that we have in terms of walking, biking, transit, as well as changing the fuel type for the vehicles that we use to an electrified transportation system.
Okay, so the city can decide what type of fuel to buy for its vehicles.
For the vehicles that we have, yes.
Port Authority could choose to have electric buses.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's not just important to electrify, but it's also important to look at the fuel sources or the electricity source that's supplying those electric vehicles. So coupling renewable energy with electric vehicles is one of the key tactics that we're banding together on.
And actually, I'm sorry, Jerry, I'll let you jump in just a second. I didn't mean to cut you off before. At the state level, if you're talking about getting net zero in terms of carbon emissions, how do you get there?
Well, first we need to set the goal. Yeah, we need to set the goal. We know that Pennsylvania is the 4th largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the country, and we also know that we are a major oil and gas state. We have coal here. We have a lot of coal-fired power plants.
Jobs, good-paying jobs, right?
Good-paying jobs, but we also have jobs in the renewable and energy efficiency sectors. We know that there are 66,000 people employed in those sectors in Pennsylvania, and that's double the number of natural gas and fossil fuel workers in Pennsylvania. So we're already making progress there, and there are opportunities to be had in renewables. And also, you know, if we can muster the political will in Pennsylvania, we can do it virtually anywhere.
Are we making any progress on that? Grant, you touched on it's not, you know, getting electric powered Port Authority buses and things like that. It's where you get it from. I lived right. I lived in California where, you know, coal-powered plants were important and they were used all over, and it's a huge state. But here, how much power do we get, say, from coal-powered plants in Pennsylvania? And how long would it take to transition off of that? Both of you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things, if you look just here in the Duquesne Light Service Territory, and you can cut up energy consumption, transmission, and distribution in different ways. But here in the Duquesne Light Service Territory, about 60% of our power is clean, carbon-free power through the form of nuclear, which is a key component to the Pennsylvania energy mix. The other opportunity is to start to grow that renewable side of the ledger in terms of matching those two together.
Actually, I'll ask this question too. You brought up nuclear, and I wanted to touch on that also. A lot of people hear that and go, uh-oh, nuclear, don't want to hear about it, 3 Mile Island, we know all that. It's a long time ago. But is that one way, I mean, to take renewable energy and clean, what do we call clean energy? Again, the transition away from that is going to take a while. Is it going to be done by 2050? I mean, can it be?
We think it can be. I mean, we didn't know how to get to the moon when we committed to get there in 10 years, and we figured it out. And we think we're a lot further along with renewable energy than we were with rocket technology, right? So in terms of nuclear energy, it's part of the transition, right? We shouldn't be building new nuclear plants. They're far more expensive than renewable energy, but we shouldn't be kicking them out the door either.
One of the key things I'd add, just in terms of how we're going about it within the city of Pittsburgh, is it's a management challenge that we've put in front of ourselves, which is first measuring the amount of energy that we can consume. So looking at the amount of fuel that we can consume in our fleet, looking at the amount of electricity that we can consume in our buildings, and starting to create an energy diet, first of all. We consume much too much energy given the amount of footprint that we have in terms of our operations. So we've started to cut back that through energy benchmarking initiatives, so measuring the amount of electricity we consume. But now with that, starting to look at more higher performing buildings, as well as the procurement issues that Ashley alludes to, which is how do we now procure clean, renewable electrical power, which is, we're just at the precipice of that.
You know, people point to melting ice caps and glaciers. They say this is the effect of man-made climate change. Coastal areas see sea levels rising and beaches becoming smaller, and tides encroaching. What about here in Pittsburgh? How do we know that climate change is affecting Pittsburgh? Is it? And if so, in what way, Ashley? You're a former aide to former Councilwoman Natalia Rudiak, so you know city issues as well as Grant does.
Yeah, and we worked in District 4, which is South Pittsburgh, a lot of steep ridges there and roadways in the valley, and we know that flooding has been worse than ever there before. People's homes are being flooded, and we're seeing landslides as well. So it's actually costing homeowners and the city quite a lot of money to fix those problems.
These things go back and forth though, right? Don't you hear that? It's cyclical. You know, we have a few rainy years, we have a few dry years. We had a drought. I mean, we've been through cycles. President Trump has said he thinks the climate goes back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, the difference, first of all, I think there's a difference between climate and weather. Right. And one of the things that we have seen, both in terms of kind of our engagement with residents through our 1PGH resilience strategy, where we talk to folks about what are the shocks and stressors that are facing everyday Pittsburghers. So shocks and those immediate negative impacts and stressors are kind of those slow-moving challenges that a city faces. And the water issue is one of the most primary ones, where we're seeing increases in precipitation that we've never seen, that is putting great strain on aging and decaying infrastructure that has been a long-time stress of cities like Pittsburgh. So when you throw 2 times the annual amount of rainfall on a community like Overbrook or in Washington Boulevard, all of a sudden these problems metastasize. What that does is put a great strain on municipal budgets. So, we've added, for example, last year we added the amount, I think it was about $13 to $15 million to address landslides. Well, that's $13 to $15 million that we can't put into other programs and projects. Money we have to spend, but also it creates some really tough trade-offs that we have to make.
So you want people, when they see a landslide, when they see Banksville Road flooded, you want them to think climate change, right?
I don't want them to think that. That is just the truth.
Is that what you think?
That's what I think for sure, and I live off of Banksville Road, so.
I kind of backed into this. I promised we'd explain what the Chief Resilience Officer does.
Sure.
What is your mission?
So part of my mission is to really identify those shocks and stressors that impact city operations and city government. So we're one of the first cities to deploy a Chief Resilience Officer in the world. So one of 100 cities through the 100 Resilient Cities Network started by the Rockefeller Foundation. And my work is basically to identify those challenges and find ways to collaborate across sectors and across departments to deliver solutions.
Okay, so you're lobbying the mayor, you're lobbying city council?
I'm advising the mayor and city council and department heads on policy solutions and fostering collaboration to find challenges as well as the solutions to those challenges.
And how difficult is it when you talk about, you're talking about a changeover? Ken mentioned jobs earlier. I know we're putting more people into what, clean energy jobs, wind, solar. How do those types of clean energy, where are they in Pennsylvania? How do they affect Pittsburgh? I don't see many wind farms. I see a couple of on the turnpike up at Somerset. But again, I used to live in California where there are wind farms in a lot of places. How are those being developed and what is being done to develop them in Pennsylvania, and does it affect Pittsburgh?
Sure. If I start, one of the key things that we've recently completed is a project with Siemens. So Siemens is one of the largest employers in the state of Pennsylvania, and they've worked with 39 other cities around the world to create what's called the City Performance Tool. And that's allowed us to create a technology roadmap to address these issues of climate change. One of the things that we've asked them are what are the 3 biggest impacts on air quality, emissions reduction, and job creation. So what you see really in the climate change space is an opportunity to effectively transition our economy to look at jobs in places like energy efficiency, renewable energy, particularly solar PV on rooftops, and other technologies that are out there like district heating and others that are the jobs of the future. So it's really about how we pivot our economy to be more robust and resilient in that fact.
Got about 30 seconds left. They're yours, Ashley.
Well, I would just say that a lot of the jobs that are in energy efficiency and renewable energy are actually in the building trades. A lot of people think this is a high-tech field, and we can't transition people from fossil fuels to renewables, but we can and we should, and that's what we're aiming for in Pennsylvania.
With state job training dollars as part of
that is part of our 100% renewable energy bill, to look at how to create a just transition to help get people into this new sector.
All right, thank you both. Good luck to you both. Appreciate you being here. All right, back-to-back wild weeks on Wall Street. Are we on the road to recession? Seems like we should talk to some experts, and we're going to do that when we come back.